Just to give you some update on some of the numbers regarding attendance at this week's General Assembly. As of yesterday, we had 81 heads of states, 42 heads of governments attending the proceedings, along with 6 vice presidents, 6 deputy prime minister, 53 ministers, 5 chairs of delegation, and 3 observers, for a total of 196 entities represented at this year's briefing. Up through yesterday, more than 8,000 delegations passed. As of yesterday, up to 8,000 delegation passes and more than 2,300 media passes were issued by our colleagues. There were more than 28,000 passes issued for various special events. And as of September 20th, 630 meetings had been requested. As of September 20th, 630 meetings had been requested, roughly 119 of which would take place at the head of state or head of government level. The number does not include bilateral meetings between member states. We don't have that number just yet. But for your information, last year we had over 1,600 bilaterals. This morning, the Secretary General spoke at the high-level dialogue on financing for development. At the start of his remarks, he took a moment to pay tribute to former French President Jacques Chirac, who passed away this morning. The Secretary General said Mr. Chirac had been a great friend with whom he'd had the pleasure of working in the European Council for many years, and he praised his pioneering commitment to the environment. France and the world are losing today a great statesman, a defender of democracy and dialogues between people, he said. We do expect a fuller, more official statement a bit later. The Secretary General said that financing for development is a test of our seriousness about ramping up the efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and stressed that without adequate funding, it will not be possible to deliver for people and planet. He noted that almost 1/3 of the world's least developed countries are currently in high debt distress, and that of particular concern are small islands, developing states, many of which are wrestling with the cost of climate change. There are signs of progress, however. He pointed to the responsible banking principles adopted earlier this week, which commit the banking industry worth $35 billion to sustainable practices. The Secretary General also said that next month he will convene 30 chief executive officers from every region to launch the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance, which collectively manages nearly $16 trillion, and he called on all countries to support the efforts to align the international financial system behind the SDGs. The Secretary General spoke today at a meeting marking the International Day of Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, a cause which he says has been the United Nations' highest disarmament priority from day one. He said that the fears that not only that progress is in eliminating nuclear weapons come to a halt, it is going in reverse. The Secretary General worries that we are slipping back into bad habits and that once again hold the entire world hostage to the threat of nuclear annihilation. The Secretary General is speaking right now at a ministerial meeting for the support of UNRWA, and he will emphasize that the role of the agency has played as a force for stability in the region. He will thank the member states for their generosity in helping them to overcome the financial crises last year and urge continued support for UNRWA. And he will also speak at the opening ceremony of a photo exhibit on the 70th anniversary on the founding of the People's Republic of China. This morning, the chef de cabinet, Maria-Luisa Viotti, spoke on behalf of the Secretary General at a ministerial meeting on cooperation between China and Africa on matters before the Security Council. She said that over the past decade, the partnership between Africa and China to promote peace and security across the continent has grown rapidly in multiple ways through China's engagement with Africa, Africa's own initiative, and the ever closer AU-UN cooperation, including with African regional organizations. Ms. Viotti noted that the growing partnership between China and the African countries comes as African countries steadily reinforce their capacities across the peace continuum, from prevention to peacemaking to peacekeeping, underpinning by inclusive, sustainable development. And in the Central African Republic, the UN peacekeeping mission there reports that 20,000 people are now displaced following the violent clashes earlier this month between the northeastern towns in the northeastern town of Birao. The Deputy Special Representative and Humanitarian Coordinator, Denise Brown, called for increased mobilization to respond to this new emergency. Protecting those displaced by the violence continues to be our priority, adding it will be important to also address the long-term consequences of the violence. The mission has stepped up its presence in the city to prevent new attacks. The situation in the country and the implementation of the peace agreement will be the heart of discussions here this afternoon during a high-level meeting featuring the President of the Central African Republic, the Secretary General, and the President of the African Union Commission. We will share the Secretary General's remarks. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change today announced 15 winners of its 2019 UN Global Action Awards. The winning projects range from an in-app program that helped plant over 122 million trees to a burger chain that uses renewable packaging and label of its carbon dioxide emission for each burger, and an innovative technology that produces electricity from the ocean. Winners hail from Singapore, Zambia, Bangladesh, Belgium, Dominica, and Brazil, among other countries. More information online. And the UN mission in Afghanistan today expressed its continued deep concern at the high number of civilian casualties in the country. In a statement issued earlier today, Mr. Yamamoto, the head of the mission, said the disregard for civilian life exhibited by parties to the conflict in recent days, especially in indiscriminate attacks, is appalling. On the 17th of September, the Taliban claimed responsibility for an attack that claimed 30 civilians and injured 51. 2 days later, 25 were killed and 93 injured in a Taliban attack in Zabul. The UN urges parties to the conflict to take all feasible precautions to avoid harm to civilians and condemns all acts of indiscriminate attacks. And our humanitarian colleagues say that a 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck Mirpur on Tuesday. That's in eastern Pakistan. At least 38 people have reportedly died. More than 700 have been injured, according to authorities, with more than 450 houses having been damaged. The government of Pakistan has not requested international assistance, and the UN and humanitarian organizations in the country are monitoring the situation closely and available to provide support. And from the Bahamas, 3 weeks after Hurricane Dorian, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the government is shifting efforts to recovery. The UN and its partners continue to support the government-led response efforts, including in the delivery of humanitarian assistance to the most vulnerable and displaced. As of Wednesday, the UN and humanitarian organizations had supported the government in delivering over 350,000 meals, 135,000 liters of water, health services, debris removal, waste management, temporary housing, and other items. And the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, signed an agreement here in New York with the government of Sudan to open several offices in the country. Ms. Bachelet said that with this milestone pact, her office is poised to accompany Sudan through an important moment in its history and to offer its support to make the transition a success for the human rights of all people in the country. More on the agreement on the website. And at 1:20 here, there'll be a briefing by Ayman Safadi, Minister of Foreign Affairs and expatriates of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. For a complete list of the briefings, refer to the media alert. And just on a sad note, I want to extend our condolences to the family of our colleague Cassandra Waldon, the Director of Communications at IFAD, who passed away this week. She was a delightful and dedicated colleague, and we're sad to learn of her passing. Yes, ma'am.
Stephane, I have two questions. The first question regarding the statement that was issued by France, Germany, and the United Kingdom regarding in which they claim that Iran is responsible for the Aramco attacks or somehow carry responsibility. Your comments on that, and could you also let us know more about the investigation in this regard?
Sure. As you know, the Secretary General sent 2 investigators under his own mandate. My understanding, they have returned. I don't have an update further than that. There is a mandated reporting line to the Security Council for later in the year, but we may have something earlier than that. But at this point, I don't have anything I can share with you.
When you mean later in the year, that you don't, or most probably are expecting that the results will be like in a month or?
No, there is a mandated reporting line under, I think it's Resolution 2231, if I'm not mistaken, to report back, I think, in December. That's the periodic reporting. Whether or not there's an interim report or something that we can share earlier, I will let you know as soon as I know.
Like any comments on the fact that they issued this statement before there were any official results?
Look, the Secretary General, for his part, has condemned the attack very clearly and has expressed his concern that any miscalculation could lead to a greater conflagration in the Gulf today. He's very concerned about the tensions. This is something he has raised with his interlocutors during the bilaterals. Member states have, as always, the right to express themselves as they do. They may have information that we do not have access to. It's not for me to say whether or not it's right or wrong that they made such a statement. Let's go to our visiting professor, and then we'll go to Joe.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I have a very quick question. As UNRWA is increasingly becoming under a great deal of pressure in terms of raising funds and so on, there are also charges of corruption and so on. I want you to share with us, if there is anything, what is the UN, what is the Secretariat or the Secretary General is doing about ensuring that UNRWA will continue to get the funds needed? And second, do you believe that there's been some sort of, maybe unintended effort to undermine UNRWA by these charges that have been leveled against
I think there are
Commissioner
two separate things. First of all, for the Secretary General, UNRWA does incredible work, and it is a force of good and stability in the region. Children throughout its area of operations depend on UNRWA for strong and quality education, access to health care, etc. He will continue to push for full funding for UNRWA as it goes about its work. As you know, there is an investigation going on. The Secretary General will act when he gets the conclusions of that investigation. As you also know, following the departure of the Deputy Commissioner General, he sent Christian Saunders to be the new deputy, and Mr. Saunders is there and working. Mr. Klein.
So as a follow-up, number one, was the Secretary General planning to discuss the current status of the internal investigation of the alleged UNRWA corruption at the ministerial meeting that you referenced in your remarks?
The focus, it's not for him to discuss the status. I mean, there is an investigation going on. He will get the results of it, and he will act.
Certain countries, as you know, have already indicated that they're going to suspend.
I think what the Secretary General's
so they're related.
Right. The Secretary General's message is that UNRWA's work continues. UNRWA's funding, like funding for all UN agencies, is under very close, review by auditors, and it's all very public and transparent. We very much hope that member states will continue funding UNRWA, and when the Secretary General gets the results of the investigations, he will act.
Well, secondly, though, why didn't the Secretary General accept the UNRWA's own internal ethics organization's recommendation that the alleged perpetrators, including the Commissioner General, well, they recommended their removal, or at least why didn't he suspend them temporarily pending the outcome of the investigation?
I think the Secretary General acted in the best interest of UNRWA and that the work it does. Yes, sir. You need. I'm happy to hear from you, but our viewers. Our viewers need to hear from you, so you need to use the microphone. It's not the State Department. I know you need to do more work here.
I just wanted to ask you if you still have confidence in the Commissioner General.
Yes, he continues to serve as. He continues to serve as Commissioner General.
And you expect him to continue to serve?
I'm not going to. I'm not in the speculation business. Yes, sir.
from SBS Australia. The Secretary General spoke very passionately about the need for increased global action on climate change. Our Prime Minister skipped the Emergency Climate Summit, and at yesterday's Assembly meeting he said that Australia is doing its bit to tackle climate change. In reality, our emissions are increasing. We have the highest emissions per capita in the developed world, and if you added on all of our fossil fuel exports, we would be the 5th biggest emitter in the world. Did Australia miss an opportunity at this summit? And given that we are the largest voice in the Pacific, have we also let down our small island neighbours who've called on Australia to be a stronger voice when it comes to cutting emissions?
Look, I think there's a lot of analysis to be done, which I would leave to the journalists. What the Secretary General did with this climate summit, which was not an end into itself, but really a point on a road traveling forward. We hope an accelerating point towards the next COP meeting. Member states came, civil society came, local governments came. Youth came. I mean, we all heard Ms. Thunberg's very passionate speech, and I think the results were positive. There were a lot of commitments that came, and I think the Secretary General's message was: if you're going to come to this meeting and you're going to speak, come with commitments. Right? He didn't want people to speak for just the sake of speaking. So I think member states were free to either seek to speak and bring a commitment or not. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stephane. You indicated that as far as the total elimination of nuclear weapons is concerned, the Secretary General indicated that the world is going in reverse. Did he make any concrete suggestion?
I'm sorry, I was reading something which I need to read out. Anyway, can you repeat the question again?
The question is, the Secretary General said that regarding the total elimination of nuclear weapons, the world is going in reverse. Did he make any concrete suggestions?
Well, the Secretary General, I think, two things. One, last year laid out an agenda for disarmament. But I think more importantly, we're now in a situation where it is the responsibility of those member states that hold nuclear weapons to ensure that the continued backward slide does not continue. He will continue, for his part, the Secretary General will continue to find and create platforms of which these member states can come together for discussion, but it is a matter of member states coming together, and he will continue to encourage them to do so. On the 2231 investigation, which I mentioned, I was just told that, as I said, the representatives of the Yemen panel of experts and the UN's own 2231's team traveled at the same time to Riyadh to examine the weapons launched at the Aramco facilities. They've now returned from Riyadh and are in the process of examining the information gathered in line with their respective mandates. They will provide their findings to the Security Council as appropriate, in due course, and as required under their respective mandates. If you use a microphone, I will speak to you.
I should know that.
See, that's exactly...
Do you have any? Do you have the numbers regarding the UNRWA donor meeting? How much they need?
I think we'll have a clear picture right after the event, which is going on now.
Are you disappointed that the United States is not speaking at this donor conference?
Listen, member states are free to come. I think the United States expressed, in the last year or so, expressed its position on UNRWA. The United States had historically been a strong supporter and strong funder of UNRWA, but I think their position and their policy is not a secret. Thank you.